Hello everyone and welcome to Learning with JGO. In today's lesson, we shall discuss a summary and an analysis on the Anthem for the Doomed Youth by Wilfred Owen. I entreat you all to like this video, subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon so that whenever I upload a new video, you don't miss out. Before we begin, let's briefly take a look at the historical background of the poem. The historical context of the poem, what actually informed the poet in writing this literary work. Wilfred Edward Salter Owen, often called in short Wilfred Owen, was born on the 18th of March, 1893 in England. As the context of the poem may suggest, Wilfred was a lieutenant, a key member of the army for Manchester. The context which with this poem was written was the First World War, of which Wilfred Owen was a part of. An event that saw about 60 million people die fighting for their countries prompted the poet in expressing his distaste for the brutalities he witnessed during that period. The Anthem for the Doomed Youth was written in 1917 while the poet was still in the hospital, nursing his injuries and trying to recover from the traumatic experience he had had from the battlefield. In the poet's experience, the stage of war is simply a platform for the waste of precious human life. Let's read the poem and try to see if we can decode some of its messages. What passing bells for these who die as cattle? Only the monstrous anger of the guns, only the stuttering rifles, rapid rattle, can patter out their hasty orisons. No mockeries now for them, no prayers, nor bells, nor any voice of mourning save the choir, the shrill demented choir of wailing shells, and buggles calling for them from sad shires. What candles may be held to speed them all? Not in the hands of boys, but in their eyes shall shine the holy glimmers of goodbyes. The pallor of girls' brows shall be their pall, their flower the tenderness of patient minds, any slow dusk a drawing down of blinds. The Anthem for the Doomed Youth generally talks about the loss of human lives to the battlefield and also illustrates the fears created by the incidents of wars, not just to the soldiers but to their families as well. The poet paints a frightening picture about death on the battlefield. He talks about how instead of prayers and hymns from the choir, soldiers hear sounds of guns at their point of death. The poet critically condemns the rituals performed for these young soldiers, for he feels it is not enough to compensate for the lives lost, all in the name of patriotism. In summary, it can be observed that the Anthem for the Doomed Youth is a protest poem. This poet emanates from two angles. The first one has to do with the poet's disapproval of warfare and bloodshed, while the second part establishes the futility of religion in preventing the massacre of precious human lives. We will at this point take a look at the line-by-line analysis of the poem. What passing bells for these who die as cattle? Only the monstrous anger of the guns, only the stuttering rifles' rapid rattle. The poet begins this poem by posing a question. He asks what bells will ring for the soldiers who have died mercilessly on the battlefield. Now, passing bells in the first line suggest to us the bells that are being rung in church following the death of a person to commence the appropriate prayers. A critical look at the first line, in which the poet poses a rhetorical question, suggests to us what could possibly be the answer to the question he is asking. The poet compares the young soldiers to cattle. He compares the massacre of soldiers on the battlefield to the slaughter of cattle in the slaughterhouse or to any other farm animal. For the millions of soldiers who have died fighting in wars, it is impossible to ring the church bell for all of them and give them decent funeral rituals. Even if these rituals can be performed, to the poet, it is not a good thing to do, or it's not a way of paying a good tribute to these soldiers. This makes the poet ask what type of bells would be rung to honor the dead young men. only the monstrous anger of the guns. The poet continues by saying that instead of proper funeral rites symbolized through the passing bells, performed for the soldiers, they are greeted with the terrifying and frightening bullets from guns. Only the stuttering rifles' rapid rattle can patter out their hasty orisons. A breakdown of these lines suggests that it is only the sounds emanating from the guns, from rifles, which shakes the entire battlefield and forces the orisons of the soldiers out. Now, what are orisons? Orison is an archaic term used to refer to a type of prayer in which servants make wishes to their objects of worship. In the third and fourth line, the secret prayers of these soldiers are unleashed by the stuttering sounds of rifles. The pattering out of hasty orisons further suggests something. It suggests that the poet, together with his colleague soldiers, were put to the fear of death by the stuttering sounds of the guns. The generation of fear comes as a result of lack of faith in the purpose of the war by the soldiers. Instead of fighting courageously, they present themselves on the battlefield, full of fear, while with a haste, reciting their last words of prayers, and end up dying like cattle. No mockeries now for them, no prayers nor bells, the shrill demented choir of wailing shells, and bugles calling for them from sad shires. No mockeries now for them, no prayers nor bells. Here in this line, the poet labels the rituals performed for the soldiers by the churches as mockeries. To the poet, the church and politics are the reasons why young innocent lives were wasted on the battlefield. Purposely to defend the interest of their country, these officials at the helm of affairs sent out people to go and die mercilessly on the battlefield. It is therefore of no surprise that the poet views the prayers and rituals performed for the dead soldiers as a joke. For the very same people performing these rites were in agreement for the innocent lives to go out and die like cattle on the battlefield. And to what end? To become heroes? No, there is no such honor in dying like the way they did, according to the poet. The shrill demented choir of wailing shells. In this line, the poet communicates a message. He tries to suggest better ways of honoring the dead soldiers. He clearly sees the rituals and prayers from the churches, as seen from the previous line, as being inadequate to honor the dead men. He termed those rituals as mockeries. In this line, however, the poet says a better way of honoring these fallen soldiers is by the very weapons they used in the battles. The demented shrill of wailing shells. A shrill is a sharp, acute, and very penetrative sound. This sound is labeled as a crazy one, coming out from wailing ammunitions. These sounds, the poet feels, will honor the dead soldiers better. The sounds of guns will ease their pain rather than the prayers from the churches, because the gunfires prevent the realistic account of what war actually is like for these soldiers. And bugles calling for them from sad shires. This line goes on further to elaborate what actually can put these fallen soldiers to rest. Bugles are brass instruments more or less like trumpets, used for signal on military grounds. For most of the soldiers who died in different places, some from shires, and cannot be found, the wailing sound of the bugles gives them a sense of peace rather than the prayers and the church bells from the churches. What candles may be held to speed them all? Not in the hands of boys, but in their eyes shall shine the holy glimmers of goodbyes. The poet begins the sestet by asking a question: what candles can be lit in assisting the soldiers with a smooth passage from this world onto the next? Candles are usually lit as a sign of farewell and of remembrance when one dies, but on their death, such candles will be unavailable. These candles will not be in the hands of boys as usual, but in the eyes of the dead soldiers. It is the eyes of the soldiers, according to the poet, that will shine the holy glimmers of goodbyes. That is to say, instead of candles, the faint light in the eyes of the soldiers will demonstrate their farewell to the next world. The pallor of girls' brows shall be their pall, their flowers the tenderness of patient minds, and each slow dusk a drawing down of blinds. The poet in these lines continues to suggest more befitting form of tributes to the dead soldiers. He says that instead of drapes over their coffins, the soldiers will be remembered by the pale faces of their loved ones, particularly girls and women. In the following line, he adds that instead of flowers that are usually presented for dead bodies, the world can honor them by being more patient in their affairs, by remembering the lives lost and choosing peace over violence, thus preventing wars from ever happening again. This is the patient mind that the poet thinks will honor the dead soldiers best. We have in the final lines of the poem, and each slow dusk a drawing down of blinds. The image of dusk, that is sunset, and the drawing down of blinds, which literally could mean the closing of one's eyes or perhaps sleep, suggests that the mere existence of life, including just waking up every day and going back to bed, will be a very honest and befitting form of tribute to the dead soldiers rather than mourning. This is because the peace for which they fought for is now being enjoyed, and they will be at rest for seeing their efforts not necessarily wasted. To conclude, the Anthem for the Doomed Youth speaks about the ills of wars and its effects on the loss of human population, as well as the relatives of the lost souls. The poet simply disregards the usual forms of rituals for the dead on the soldiers, but rather prescribes more authentic forms of tributes he thinks will bring these innocent soldiers to rest. Living peacefully, remembrance, and showing gratitude are some of the practices the poet thinks are appropriate in commemorating the soldiers. Thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like, comment, and share.